Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
As you can tell, if you're watching this on YouTube, or even if you're listening on audio, you might hear bird noises in the background. Wind, nature sounds. We just couldn't be in the studio to record this today. We thought, let's get the GoPro, let's go out on a trail, a nature trail, and film this on a beautiful afternoon here in Pennsylvania, in the United States.
Yeah.
So,
what do they call it? Forest bathing?
yeah,
Let's grab some technology and go forest bathing with it.
Yeah, the three of us are basically going to go on a walk together and have a conversation. You don't have a microphone on your side, but at the end of the podcast, we'll talk about how maybe you can come and make your voice heard in the comment section. Mm-hmm. So tell me if you've ever had this experience, maybe as a child in your life, if you're listening along or watching along. You're at school, something happens where maybe you're picked on or made fun of, somebody's treating you badly, and you talk to one of your parents, maybe your mom or your dad, and you say as a child, what's going on? I feel bad about this. I feel, upset that I'm being picked on or, pulled aside or singled out. Rejected. And mom or dad or whoever's talking to you, the older person or guardian in your life says, oh, don't worry about those kids or don't worry about those people. They're just jealous. Or maybe they'd say they're just envious. Usually they're just jealous is the word that they would use as an old person. Have you ever had that happen in your life, Antonia?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course I got
Same
that
here.
line. I think everybody's gotten that line.
Yeah. So what? First of all, what's going on there? If we have an issue where people are picking on us or something, it's interesting. The first instinct of the adults around us as children is to go, oh, they're just jealous.
Yeah.
And kind of blame the other person for, I guess, a feeling of wanting something that they can't have or desiring something that's not theirs.
Yeah.
And so that's why they're picking on you, basically, is the message.
Yeah, it's a feature, not a bug, right?
Yeah.
They're not picking on you because there's something wrong. They're picking on you because there's something so right they have to make it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that what's interesting is
what a good way to help the ego, right?
Right, yes, absolutely. And I think that there's something to be said for little burgeoning fragile egos wanting to hear a bit of affirmation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you use the word envy. Sometimes they say they're just envious. I don't think I've ever heard somebody use the word envious there, but if they did, that would be a particularly canny parent, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a big difference between jealousy and envy. Jealousy is about protecting something you already have.
Okay.
And envy is about desiring something somebody else has. So I think in those moments when they say they're just jealous, I think that they actually do mean to imply that they have envy. You possess something that they want and they can't have it for some reason.
Yeah.
And so they have to demonize that thing. You have to marginalize it, make fun of you for it because you possess something that they want.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that that is a very interesting protection for a little burgeoning ego.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, well, and this is an interesting thing. I think people often conflate these two things constantly. I mean, I do. I just did it just now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I make, in my mind, much of a distinction between envy and jealousy.
Yeah.
In fact, I always have thought that jealousy was wanting something that somebody else had. Well, that person's jealous of me. But what you're saying is the definition of jealousy is more like to be jealous maybe of a partner.
Yes.
Right? I have a partner and now they're getting attention from somebody else. Like if you're getting attention from another person that's not me, or even my kids, and getting attention from somebody not dad,
right,
another dad figure in their life, I might feel jealous of that. Like the jealousy is like the attempt, it's like an emotional, almost how I see it is like a way to like scoop something back to myself.
Right.
Like physically.
Yeah, well, and I think that was its original definition was possessiveness, particularly around sexuality.
Yeah.
It was like, and the word jealousy, it sounds close to zealous, right, or zealotry, because I believe they have a very similar root, meaning that jealousy also comes with this idea of like fervor, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're jealous and possessive of a partner, particularly a sexual partner, there's like a fire that comes inside of you anytime you think you might be at any sort of risk of losing them.
Well, and the distinction I had in my head was from my old religious days, my old faith background. Because in the Bible, the Old Testament especially, talks about how God is a very jealous God.
Right.
I remember telling my parents, I thought jealousy was a bad thing.
Right.
I thought we're not supposed to be jealous. Like, no, but this is good jealous. This is the good kind of jealousy. I remember
Right.
telling him as a kid, like, no, this is not the bad kind. And so the distinction I had in my mind was there's good jealousy and there's bad jealousy.
Right.
And that was really the only distinction I had. I didn't even think about this envy idea.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, it was in my old-timey religious days that I learned the distinction between those two concepts, because the Bible never says that God is envious.
Yeah.
It does say he's jealous, but it never says he has envy. And the reason why, I mean, it was when I was doing my research, it was told to me, well, what would he envy?
Yeah.
What does somebody else possess that he would want? But if he's already in possession of something, like take, for example, you know, in those theological, you know, readings, and the inference is that he has a right to worship.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore he is a jealous God for worship, right? If you're worshiping other gods, there's like a possessiveness he has around that.
Yeah.
So the point of all that, though, is envy is its own creature, and we conflate it with jealousy a lot. In fact, we use the word jealous when we actually mean envious.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. We've conflated not only the terms, but we almost have erased the word envy from our vocabulary, instead using the word jealousy,
Yeah.
which has a totally different connotation. But envy is a very interesting, concept in and of itself. Like, if you think about it through a biblical phrase, if God possesses the quality or trait of jealousy, but does not possess the quality or trait of envy, that makes envy that actually elevates the concept of jealousy a little higher.
Yeah.
It makes it so that it could be considered a godly trait. Now, I'm no longer in my old-timey religious days, so I no longer think that, you know, something being applied to God in the Bible necessarily indicates its moral superiority.
Yeah.
Did we make a good choice here? Because, whew, I'm hoofing it.
We can slow down if
All
you
right. I'm like,
want. A breathless podcast.
this is a breathless podcast, because I didn't realize there were so many ups and downs on this trail.
Climb kind of an elevated space.
We
there.
did. All right.
And it's probably what? If, Fahrenheit, it's probably in the mid 80s Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius.
Yeah, it's toasty.
For all of you people that don't live in the U.S.
All right. Okay. So back to the point. They're like, why is Antonia so breathless? Like, I'm going up an incline. Just bear with me for a sec. So back to the topic.
And you're not in sensible shoes.
I'm in sensible shoes.
Aren't they like a little bit of a platform? They're like
no.
nicer shoes?
They're like they're really good shoes. They're
spongy.
They're absorbent.
Okay.
They absorb the shock. And so the shoes are not the problem, but
Well, you want to stop for a second?
I
Just
think-
land your point so you don't have to move to think.
oh, that's a good idea.
Step here in the shade and then now land your point for a second.
All right, so back to this concept of envy. Not that it necessarily means that something being a quote unquote, like a trait that is possessed by God in the Bible, in my current paradigm, doesn't necessarily mean that it is a superior character trait.
Yeah.
But I will say it's very interesting. It's interesting to see that I think also there are many scriptures that talk about the challenge of envy, way more than jealousy. So in my old-timey religious days, when I did this, you know, contrast of these two concepts, I think I realized that envy, I think it's one of the 7 deadly sins. And envy is one of the passions of the Enneagram, right? It's Enneagram 4s have a passion of envy.
Yeah.
You'll see that the word envy pops up all sorts of places that indicates that it isn't a feature, right? It's a bug. It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge. And yet, we have all but erased the word from, I think, our sort of contemporary vernacular. We don't really talk about envy very much. And yet, I think that envy shows up everywhere. I think it shows up in the type world a lot. I think that I think we might have even done a podcast a long time ago. I could be wrong. My memory is not great for all 500 podcasts.
We're coming up on 500, so
we're
there's a
coming
lot.
up on 500. There is I think we did a podcast on type patriotism and type envy, where personality types possess characteristics or traits that we wish we had. And the challenge with envy is that it very much falls under the grass is always greener concept, which is we envy all of the benefits or positive things that comes along with the thing that we're desirous of
Yeah.
to possess. but we don't see all of the problems that inevitably come along with it. So when we experience things like type envy, I mean, and I have moments of this, there are many times when I just think, man, if I was just a judger, I could get my life together, right?
Yeah, what's interesting is when you're envying those kinds of things, you're not envying the result you are envying like what a judger could do result, but it's not a specific result. Like, I want that big house and I envy that big house.
Right.
Like covetousness, like I want that thing. It's more, I want the traits or the process or the context that gets me the big house or the, whatever the result is.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what also I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Because I struggle with this a lot. Like I'll look at somebody like an Alex Hormozy online, right? He's super really good into business. He's got great businesses and stuff. And I don't envy his millions of dollars. I envy the thought processes that he's using, probably because it's my tertiary and my ENFP personality,
Your
my
10-year-old
effectiveness. I envy how well he's able to manage resources and get things done and simplify things and just do the right action all the time.
Yep.
Like I envy that. And it's the result of that is he's a successful business person that has a great YouTube channel and does all this cool stuff that I think of. I don't envy his life specifically or his specific businesses.
Right.
It's more, I envy traits that he has, the processes he has.
Yep. Yep.
And the markers of the success make it so that I envy those traits.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
If he was a loser, I probably wouldn't envy him.
Yeah.
Like I'd be like, oh, I don't want those traits. Those are loser traits or whatever. Like if that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that envy shows up in the type world all the time with being desirous of capacities that other types have a knack for, right? They have they have a talent, whether or not they've built the skill around it. Like you said, I mean, I've known ENTJ, take for example, I get covetous or envious rather of judger tendencies or judger preferences. Yeah. And that would make me, if I was a judger, that would make me have ENTJ preferences. Yeah. And I've known some ENTJs that have results that I'm very envious of. And I know ENTJs that haven't really done much with their pre-wiring, right? Yeah. They've ended up being just as much of a wanderer as I have and haven't really, capitalized on what I would say is their talent. So you're right. I think that the results oftentimes point to the thing that makes me desirous of, whatever it is that I'm envying. Yeah. But it is just the quality, and I think that's kind of the point of type though. Type points us back to pre-wiring, and we're going to be a lot more envious when we're type envious. We're going to be envious of the wiring, not necessarily the results.
So why does this matter though? So what if I'm envious of Alex Hormozy, or somebody that's watching or listening right now is envious of something else in somebody's trait? I mean, don't we have that as humans? Mm-hmm. Like, I beg the question, I'm teeing you up to give a thoughtful response here, but why does it matter to have a relationship to envy, to not be envious?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at the concept of envy throughout history, we've called it things like the green-eyed monster. Mm-hmm. It's one of the 7 deadly sins, as mentioned before, I believe. So yeah. If I've forgotten that, 7 deadly sins weren't really a religious thing that I studied, but I think I picked that up someplace. It's a very undermining energy, unlike jealousy, which has some benefits to it actually. Now, jealousy that is, like over amplified. Jealousy that is out of control is always going to be a problem, because that comes under possessiveness, and then you behave as if you own the person, and it can turn into a lot of really bad, a lot of bad behaviors.
Oh yeah.
But a baseline of jealousy of like, no, I'm in a relationship with somebody, we have decided to be monogamous, somebody else is trying to hit on this person that I am in a clearly stated monogamous relationship with. There's something to be said for having a little bit of jealousy come up, a little bit of zealotry for the relationship.
Well, some people like it.
Yeah.
Some people like their partner getting a little jealous about that. Like some people will get attention from someone else on purpose.
Right.
To feel the jealousy, like, okay, this person still wants me.
Yeah, exactly.
This person still wants me in their life. They still desire me. If they're upset the fact I'm talking to this other person, that's a good thing.
Right.
A lot of people interpret it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that manipulating a situation in order to make your partner jealous is not exactly the healthiest way of going about it.
Yeah.
That said, if the scenario just incidentally comes up, there is something to be said for your partner feeling a sense of protectiveness around the relationship, not around necessarily the individual. so that they're in a relationship with. But it's like, yeah, I want to protect the relationship. I want to have zealotry for that. So there is something to be said for jealousy.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to be said for envy. I think envy is an understandable emotion that we experience. We did a podcast a long time ago. I think I mention it every once in a while about the sorghum farms.
Yeah.
That we are like, we've evolved to understand how well we're doing in comparison and contrast to other people.
Yeah.
So we are going to notice when other people have more and less than us. And when people have more, that does help us have a drive, right? A drive towards maybe achieving the same. So there is something to be said for having like that spark of, a little spark of envy, like a little spark of like, oh, I could have that.
Yeah.
But envy unbridled is, in my opinion, way more destructive than I think we give it credit for. And I think that, I guess before I said there's not anything to say for envy, I guess there's a little bit of something to say for envy. There is the little bit of fire in our belly that it gives us that makes us want to go further and maybe work hard to gain the thing that we have envy around. But I find that people don't often use or harness their envy for drive and ambition. I find that they have a tendency, particularly if it's something that they cannot possess, if they have envy for something that is not within their grasp, I find that leads to some of the most egregious othering, right? Like that turns other people into not people. It turns them into objects of hatred and ill will, ill wishing. Like you hope that person no longer gets to possess the thing that you want. You hope they are robbed of it so that that can prevent you from continuing to feel envy, right? Yeah. It's like you're cursing another person because they're in a better position than you are, just so both of you can be in a bad position effectively. Yeah. And so envy is actually quite destructive. It's incredibly undermining. And I think I've mentioned this like 3 times, so I'll probably stop mentioning it at this point, but I find it really interesting that we don't use the word. We have almost erased it from our lexicon to some extent. Like people don't go, oh, they're just envious. They say they're just jealous, right? And so identifying envy in not just ourselves, but also in how it shows up and manifests in society, I think explains a lot of why we're in discord over things that I don't really sometimes understand why we're in discord around those things. Yeah. Like take, for example, I think envy is at the heart of ageism, all ageism. Maybe not ageism for the extreme elderly. I think ageism against the extreme elderly is usually because we haven't made peace with our mortality. Yeah. So it's not envy, it's actually the fact that they're reminding us of our imminent demise. But I think the envy that people in midlife feel for younger people and the envy that younger people feel for people in midlife, I think it creates a lot of generational animus. Yeah. And I do think it goes down more to envy than anything else.
I bet a lot of parent-child dynamics are feeling this for each other and not even knowing it. Because it's like completely wrong to feel envy for my children, right? Like society would tell me that's wrong. Right. My inner self would tell me that's wrong. But I wonder if like that's still undergirthing some things that we experience as humans. And then envy for our parents that they've got all together, or that they have, you know, they've spent a lifetime building wealth and having the nice things maybe that they have, like here in the West, for example. And we're like, I want all that now with me and my partner, you know, in my 20s or 30s or whatever. But we don't even know, because we're not supposed to feel this emotion like you're talking about. We don't use the word. Yeah. But I wonder if there's like an undercurrent of it, and it causes confusion because we're not identifying the emotion itself. We're somehow trying to like explain it away in some other reason, maybe even in conflict or whatever. Yep. But maybe it's a lot of that going on under the surface.
Yeah, because when we feel emotions we don't particularly like, actually, if we feel any emotion, honestly, it seems like we're always looking for a source. We're always trying to find the story or the narrative that is attached to that emotion. And envy is one that when we feel it, we don't always know what we're feeling. We just know we feel icky. Yeah. And if that person is sparking it somehow, and we don't know that it's actually coming from within us, the envy is sourced inside, but it's when I'm around that other person, that's when I'm feeling it. It's very easy to create a narrative or story that that person is causing me to feel icky and it's their fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's any negative emotion, but yes, envy as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's easier to project it onto the other person. But
Exactly.
Hey, you're the reason I'm feeling this way.
But I think envy, even more so than other negative emotions, I think ends up being sort of a challenge in this area. Because, you know, if I'm in a relationship with another person and they're legitimately saying terrible, nasty things to me, and I'm feeling rejected and hurt, yes, it is true. Maybe I should be in a more emotionally abundant state, and be able to be resilient against that sort of thing. And it ultimately is the emotion coming up in me. But that other person is like a legit catalyst in that moment, right? I had an expectation that they would be supportive, and they're not being supportive. They're being, you know, insulting and undermining. So yeah, so it kind of makes sense that I would see that person as, you know, being a domino, at least knocking over a domino in how I'm feeling. When it comes to envy, the other person might not have any idea. They might not even know who you are, right? Like, they don't have to be a part of this relationship at all. They don't have to, like, there is no expectation necessarily that they were going to, you know, make you feel good things. And so it's not like they're falling down on a job or anything. It's not like you're in relationship to them. Sometimes that happens, but envy is way, way, way more of an inner game thing. It's way more in-house than a lot of other emotions. And so that's, I think, another reason why it can also be sneaky, very tricksy, because we are usually experiencing it just inside of ourselves without the other person even knowing it. And so there's not always a really good mirror back of what's going on.
Yeah.
So going back to your statement about parents and children, I think about generations and the timeline of one's life, and how at every moment in the timeline, you're given things and things are taken from you, or at least withheld for a time.
Or they fade.
Right, they're taken, or they're withheld.
Yeah.
So
taken seems like there's intent behind it. That's what I was saying.
Time does. Time takes it from you. I just mean the timeline itself.
Sure.
Like, time takes things from us. It gives things to us, and it takes things from us, or withholds them until later. So, for example, when we're young, we get youth, which is an extraordinary gift. You know, youth comes with possibilities. It comes with an abundance of time in front of you. It comes with freshness. Yeah. It comes with sort of burgeoning potential, and people cut you a lot of slack. They don't expect that you will have figured everything out yet. It comes with extra vitality and energy. It comes with beauty, or, you know, basically the most beauty you're going to experience in your lifetime as a general rule, right? It comes with an ability to get up in the morning and not feel extraordinarily tired, right? Like, it's kind of hard to communicate what youth comes with until it starts to be taken from you. Yeah, it starts to fade. Yeah. When you're older, age comes with, or what you're given as you age, is experience. And experience cannot be hacked. Like, it's something that you only get by doing it. And just like it's hard to communicate all the gifts that come with youth, it's hard to communicate all the gifts that come with experience. And when you're young and you don't have experience, it's very, very, very easy to marginalize it. But the gifts are obvious. Yeah. Right? What comes with experience? Wisdom, savviness, a lot of times a capacity to learn the right lessons. Some financial stability is oftentimes associated with it, not always. Relational success is, often associated with it, not always. But your success rate goes up because you have experience now. Yeah. So you're not just stabbing at things wildly, you're like figuring things out. And I do think that youth, whether it is consciously aware of it or not, I think it envies experience. And so it tries to marginalize it. It tries to act like experience is not important. In fact, I think a lot of times young people, and we had a conversation about this before, young people will instead sort of worship insight. as a substitute for experience. Like insight, the assumption is that the only thing that comes along with experience is insight.
Can I be devil advocate by this, by the way?
Yeah.
Finish your thought. I just want to also inject something here too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think young people, I mean, just to, I guess, close up the thought, I think older people envy youth.
Yeah.
They envy that time period that is now slipping through their fingers.
Yeah.
Particularly in midlife. And whether or not they will state that out loud, I mean, it's hard to sometimes own that we envy things because we believe if we say we envy it, it means that we're not grateful for what we have instead.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's the case. I think we can still be grateful for what we have while envying components of another thing. And I think when we get older, it's hard not to envy youth. Like, who wouldn't go back? Who wouldn't take everything that they've worked so hard for, all of their insights and experience, all the things that they've gathered, all the wisdom that they've gathered, and then shove it into a 20-year-old body? Right? So
can you imagine?
It's very easy to feel envy for just youth itself.
Yeah.
And that makes it easy to marginalize. I find myself doing it all the time. I find myself dismissing youth all the time. And I think it does come from envy. Not that I'm not grateful for what I have at this age, but I think that green-eyed monster comes up, and it's very easy to other young people. And on the flip side, I've just already mentioned how young people, I do believe, envy experience. They envy what middle-aged people have accomplished, or even a little older. You know, it's like, well, why do they get to have a second home? It must just be because of the time period in which they were born. And it's like, or they figured a bunch of stuff out through experience and they earned that. So it's easy for young people to marginalize an other age and experience because it's being withheld from them right now. They don't get to have access to it. Yeah. Just like youth is withheld from middle-aged people, never to be revisited.
This idea of insight covering for experience, I want to push back on that as a devil's advocate.
Okay.
I'm taking a position I don't necessarily embody, but just if someone's watching or listening right now, I can almost imagine maybe somebody that's younger, in their 20s, kind of to your point, saying, well, yeah, my parents or older generations were able to build wealth or do these things.
Right.
I feel envious for it. Maybe they could identify that, but it doesn't really matter what they feel because there's no way for a person now to ever replicate the experience that older person had. And I would say that maybe what we're positing is that the insights you have they're translation insights, meaning, yeah, maybe I don't live in an economy or a world that can get me the thing that the older generation has, but maybe I could have an insight to translate what would the same situation or same sort of context mean for me.
Right.
Because I would say a lot of people go, all I have is insight. We're growing up in a postmodern world, not a modernist world. Like there aren't just 3 television channels. Like there's infinite number of misinformation, information, all sorts of crazy stuff all over the internet. Like this is a way different world than my grandfather who fought in World War II grew up in. To take the cues of my life and look to his wisdom for how to live, like he would be upset I have long hair. I mean, like he would be upset if I had
a pool table.
Yeah, a pool table in my basement. Like anything that would have any markers of like, free form, creative thought. Like, so I think younger people, when they're looking at older generations, I guess you could look at it through the lens of envy, but you could also look at it through like, that's not going to work for us. And we know it's not going to work for us. You older generations have no idea about what our experience is here on the ground. Like, let's take one example, dating, like finding a romantic partner. You and I, Antonia, at our age and station life, have no idea the challenge that younger people face in trying to find a partner, like a life partner or somebody that they want to be with for like a more serious relationship. Like find a casual partner probably for the night is easy, but so I'm like looking at people in that world, and my children are growing up and they're going to be entering this very soon in their own young adulthood. And I think, how could they take wisdom from an older generation that has no idea what it's like to live there? Our generation didn't have to contend with AI taking our jobs, right when we're ready to enter the workforce, or globalism, or like all the things that are coming down the pike, and just confusion of information. So I think maybe it's envy for the things that people, I almost wonder if it's an envy for a life that can never be had. That's kind of what I'm coming down to, is like, just like an older person envying a younger person's life, I can never have a 22-year-old's life again. Ever. Like, doesn't matter what I do, I'm never going to be, maybe technology someday would like reduce my age.
Like nanobots can repair our cells or something.
Maybe, but that's a long shot. Like the likelihood of that happening is almost zero, at least at this point in history. So a young person looking at an older person and saying, I envy something that's impossible. I can never live the life. It's just never gonna, like, there's just too many people on the planet. There's too much resource to have to distribute, et cetera. So I think at that point, it's like, what are we, if we could tune into the envy that we identify, because I identified myself too. I totally identify I'm envious of certain things. What do we do with that? Like, how do we actually navigate that space if we can identify that emotion?
So I hear two things. The first one is the pushback on whether or not young people envy the experiences of older people.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, what do I do if I identify envy in me?
Yeah.
What do I do with that? So let me take the first one as the pushback against this idea that young people envy older people's experiences, or that they've had experiences, particularly since those experiences might not translate into their context. And I don't know if I think that younger people envy the specific experiences that older people have had. I think that they envy that they are experienced, meaning that they gain all of the advantages of having walked a certain terrain before, regardless of whether or not the terrain shifts slightly over time. Meaning that, like, if you have social phobia and the world is very different now than it was when, say, your parents were younger and they were trying to deal with their own experiences of, like, potential social rejection, or, you know, all of the fears around how people are going to respond to them. It's like, it's a whole different world. So your experiences don't mean anything to me. That said, when you've gone through any experiences around fear of social rejection or fear of, you know, those kinds of challenges, over time, you get to a place where you're like, oh, why was I fearing that anyway? Right? Regardless of what the terrain was, once you walk it, you go, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be okay. And so there's a self-possessiveness that comes, or like a being self-possessed.
Yeah.
There's a sense of confidence. You've observed yourself overcome obstacles and you go, oh, I can get over that.
Or you've just gotten used to the situations.
Yeah. You've
Like,
acclimated.
How many times, like, when you first start driving, it's like hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, you can't have the radio on, you're like nervous you're going to go over the edge of the road.
Right.
You drive for like a month or two and you start like driving with one hand.
Yeah.
You can listen to the radio again, like, you know, the stuff like that. You just get used to the context you're in.
Yeah, or worse, like you're juggling coffee and with me, like putting my makeup on in the rearview mirror, and like, yeah, I mean, like you get to a place where you're pretty cavalier about it. And I think it's that is envied. I think
rested in the self.
The feeling rested into the self. Now, of course, there's going to be somebody who's listening that's like, I know a lot of insecure older people, and it's like, yeah. Like, it's not, but the trend is that when you get to at least midlife, you start to relax a little bit, right?
Well, they've certainly been able to feed themselves that long.
Yeah, exactly.
And figure out how to like pay the bills, and I mean, it's like there's not complete nothingness there.
Yeah, exactly. And
they have a life at all, you know?
And so there's a sense of having figured some things about yourself out. And I think that is the thing that's envied.
Yeah.
Is just the kind of the relaxed into self mannerisms and affectation and ability to navigate the world and know it's probably going to be okay, right? The ability to not take things so seriously. In fact, I see that a lot of young people push back against middle-aged people all the time for not taking things as seriously as the younger person thinks they should. And I think that there's a little bit of envy there. There's some envy, like the story becomes, it's because you guys destroyed our world and we now have to deal with it. But what we know as middle-aged people is, no, people have been destroying all of this for a long time. Like, we inherited it too. And there's no actual saving the world or solving all of the problems. There's just navigating them better or worse.
Yeah.
So
Mitigation.
Chill out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, chill out, it's going to be fine, right? Or it's not, and we're all going to die, and that'll be fine too, right? There's like this sort of, I don't know, there's a, you know, oh, you took it, what does Ricky Gervais say? You took offense to that, and I thought it was funny, and that's why I'm a happier person than you are. Right? It's like in middle age, there are some uptight middle-aged people who have had no empowerment in their entire lives, right? There's like the trope about the middle-aged, you know, person who's losing their minds over something small, but when they go against young people, I think that they're manifesting and acting out their envy for youth.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's them hating young people. I think that's them envying young people and their potential to be empowered. and they never experienced it themselves, and so their envy is now it's striking out. And I think there's a lot of that happens between generations. And that's just one example, by the way. We're talking about generations, but we could talk about it in terms of type. We could talk about it in terms of economics. I mean, there's literally no end to the things that we feel envious about as humans.
Let's talk about it in terms of utility. So like me, you, and the person that's with us right now watching or listening, what's the utility of understanding this in our lives? So the one thing I would say, by the way, we can start walking back this way if you want to. Okay. The one thing I would say is, like you said, striking out. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find to identify envy in me first. I think what I'm looking at is, okay, if I want to destroy something or take something down, like it might be legitimately needing to be taken down. Mm-hmm. Like it might even be a legit cause that I'm trying to destroy. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if that's always I could have my feelers out for, is there envy related or involved in this in any way? Mm. So like, anytime I want somebody to be broken, damaged, mm-hmm. taken down, mm-hmm. it feels like envy is a very destructive force. Mm-hmm. And it wants to, basically it's that murder-suicide energy. It's like, well, mm-hmm. if I can't have it, then I don't want you to have it either. Yeah. Kind of energy. Yeah. And it tries to like take something good from somebody else too, because I can't have it. Because mm-hmm. I can't like vicariously feel good about that person having something. Yep. So let's talk about application, like mm-hmm. in our lives maybe. Yeah. We go that angle. Yeah. Like to identify it itself, if we want to take something down, like let's say you're really triggered by some political cause mm-hmm. or something that somebody's doing mm-hmm. and you want to take it down, destroy it. Yeah. Like that might be legit. Like it might need to be destroyed. Yeah. But I bet you it's still coming from, there's like a little bit of envy in there. Yeah. In some way. Oh, if we're really being honest with ourselves.
Most assuredly, because almost everything we do is a cocktail of motivations, and some of them are not good. Yeah. Yeah. And so anytime we're trying to destroy something, it would be unsurprising if envy was like a big node in that system of intentions, and especially smuggled ones. Yeah. And I think it's really important. I think, I can't remember what you just said to trigger this thought, but you said something really smart, or at least asked a really smart question. Which is...
Happens all the time, Antonia. Don't be surprised.
I'm not. Do you hear the not surprise in my voice?
I'm kidding, yes.
Right. I'm very used to you asking very smart questions and teeing me up to have thoughts that may or may not be brilliant. We'll find out. Let me start talking and see what happens. So I think the reason why it's important for us to keep our finger on the pulse of envy in like scenarios like that is... if envy has been more of a motivation than we realize, if it was a big part of it and we didn't know that about ourselves, it's when we're trying to construct something new that it starts to come out, because we didn't actually fix anything, we just switched roles. Okay. So take, for example, this concept of unearned status. There's a lot of very understandable conversation around unearned status. Like people who just get to have it because of almost like a birthright. Yeah. And people who don't, they have to work 10 times harder, and even then it might not manifest for them.
Yeah. Like anybody born in the United States gets American citizenship. Mm-hmm. Just because of where you're born. You have the unearned status of being a United States citizen. Right. You didn't earn that. Right. You were just born here. Yeah. Right. All of us were.
Or kids, trust fund kids. Yeah. Or the
whatever level it is,
beautiful.
But, yeah.
Or the ridiculously intelligent. Or one's skin tone. Right. Like there's a bunch of stuff here around unearned status. Right. So. I
was trying to find a real ubiquitous that most people could identify of having, like a citizenship. Right. Of whatever country you're from.
Exactly. Right. And especially if it's a country that isn't,
doing well.
Is doing well. Yeah. Right. Relatively. Even though the whole world is unraveling relatively well in an unraveling world. Yeah. So regardless of what it is, when you're talking about unearned status, if the desire to equalize has more envy in there than a person wants to admit, if they are successful, what ends up happening is that they replace themselves and people like them as the people who have the unearned status. They don't actually equalize. Okay. Right? So... I don't think that those beauty standards are realistic. So instead of equalizing and making it so that beauty is seen in all shapes and sizes and all forms, I'm instead going to change the beauty standard to match me. And I'm going to demonize the person who used to have the beauty standard. Like take, for example, extremely thin women, right? There's like women who are just very naturally super thin. Their assumption, particularly since like I grew up in the 90s where that was, it comes and goes, like being like twiggish, I guess you could say. It comes and goes for whether or not that's the beauty standard at the time. In the 90s it was. And so I grew up just thinking everybody, all women who were extremely lean, just there was this assumption that they were super confident in their bodies. And it took me a while to figure out, no, because people are constantly dogpiling them too and telling them to eat a sandwich, even including myself. I was a person who was like, eat a sandwich, right? And so if that's the beauty ideal, there is this desire to not go, well, that's beautiful and also curvy is beautiful or whatever.
Yeah. There's
a desire to say, no, that's not beautiful anymore and curvy's beautiful if that matches mine. So the challenge with envy is that it erodes people's, what they believe is their positive intention and motivation to turn things for the better. If there is a heavy dosing of envy in there, when they get into a position of power, should they be able to do that? Should they be able to be influential? They haven't actually solved anything. They've just swapped roles.
Okay.
Right? And I think that that's one of the reasons why it's really important for us to keep our finger on the pulse of envy is too much of it means that we're now going to want to be the person who's envied.
Yeah.
Right? That the desirous thing is not the position of the having, it's the position of the being envied. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of this, so what you're talking about then is there's a component of power to this. And a component of, well, I don't know if spitefulness is the word, but it's like once I get in power, I'll switch things and make them more in the image of myself is what you're positing.
Yeah.
So again, how do we translate that to you and me, our lives? And how do we translate to somebody that's here with us in this conversation?
Right.
Like, how do we
contextualize it and not just make it a thing that's interesting to Antonia Dodge?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like in a real practical way. I think it is an interesting conversation, but it's going to be really hard to identify. Like everybody that would go against maybe a beauty standard of yours, I don't think most people would go, well, that's because I'm envious. Like no one's going to want to admit that.
No, envy is very rarely owned, and that's why I think. I mean, I guess I'm not going to stop saying it. I said I was going to stop saying it earlier, but we have basically erased it from our lexicon. We don't talk about envy unless it is in terms of somebody else.
We'll project it outward, but we won't own it for ourselves.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I could argue that envy might be some of the most insidious shadow content.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard for us to own it.
Well, then maybe one exercise we could do, like you, me, and the person watching or listening, is just try to identify the things that we are probably envious around at all. Like just like finding the muscle cluster of envy in our lives. Like, where do I tend to be envious? And again, I think the through line is, what do I tend to want to destroy or see destroyed, without really even understanding it maybe fully.
Yeah.
Like if I use the word destroy, dismantle, deconstruct about anything, is that a through line for envy, right? Like, I don't know, like I'm having a hard time with this concept because I could identify envy in my own life, but I'm like, it's hard to know what to do with it. Like it's hard to know what to do with the identification as I think about it.
Yeah, I think, as we mentioned before, just like with jealousy has a purpose. And I was like, I don't see any purpose with envy. And then like 2 seconds later, I was like, oh no, I see the purpose of envy.
Yeah.
Envy can be a motivator.
Yeah.
It's a motivator, not necessarily to take somebody else down, although that's usually what it ends up motivating us toward. It can be a motivator for us to do better, right? To go, okay, why do I want something that somebody else has? Is it because I actually want that for myself, or what is the thing that I want? Sometimes we think we're envying, like we diagnose our envy if we were to look at it and sit with it. And by the way, those who know the Enneagram and have identified themselves as Enneagram 4s, they probably are like ahead of the game on the work, right? They've already had to
This is like the water they swim in, right?
This is water they swim in. So all the rest of us that are like, do I feel envy? Is that a thing of mine?
Yeah.
So I think the beginning is, or like the first thing is to identify that I have it inside of me. And then when I'm trying to figure out what I feel envious around, have some discretion around that. Like you mentioned, when you think about somebody like Alex Hormozi,
Yeah.
it's not the specific results that he's gained. It's the fact that he has the capacity to get those results in what feels like an easier way than you. Like because of his type preferences maybe, or because of his life choices or whatever. Like you envy the system that helps him create those results.
Yeah.
And so I think when a person is tapping into their own envy, sometimes it's easy to misdiagnose what we're actually envious about. We might think that we envy a person's partner, when really what we're envying is companionship and a lack of loneliness.
Yeah.
Right? It's and so if lack of loneliness is the thing that we're envying, it might be a lot easier to not be lonely, to figure out the mechanism or system of not being lonely, than it is of having that person's partner. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so it's kind of a diagnostic tool for us to figure out what it is that we're missing in our lives and get better at creating goals for ourselves to rise up to those things. Like envy might be actually a helper in some ways of what our path is supposed to be, right? Like what's the next thing? If I'm super envious, like right now, I'm feeling very envious of my younger self. I can feel it in myself all the time. I'm so envious of, and honestly, when I look back at my younger self, I'm like, why did I waste everything? Why did I waste so many opportunities?
Why were you so insecure?
Why was I so insecure?
That's what I think of when I think of my younger self. Like, why was I so insecure? There's no reason.
Right. I'm like, I have so many opportunities in front of me, and why didn't I take them, and why didn't I understand? And so I go, okay, well, I can't become my younger self, so what am I actually envying? Well, I mean, just basic things like I'm envying the body that I had when I was younger. Well, I can't have that body, exactly because I was a younger person. But I can certainly do a bunch of stuff to get closer to it. It's not like I'm in my 80s, right? Or 90s. Like I'm not almost, I'm not at the end of my life. If I'm envying my dexterity and flexibility, then I need to be kicking up my yoga, right? And those kinds of things. So I do think that envy can be a good diagnostic tool. We just have to own that we feel it. And we have to get an accurate read on what it is that we're truly envying.
Yeah. Yeah, when I think that's an interesting idea of being envious of your own self as a younger person. Like not just other young people, but like you as the young person in the past.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so it's a diagnostic to help us get dialed into changes we want to make. Mm-hmm. And maybe again, if I look at like an Alex Hormozi and I look at the traits he has, creating the success in his life, I don't ever think I really want to be him, but man, I wish I had the clarity of what to do and the resource and the simple thinking he has in order to think about how resources made. Just kind of have a sense of it, right? Just a gut sense of it. Maybe it also gives me a list of the things I want to, like the traits I want to work on, the skills I want to build.
Yeah.
If I can be really sensitive to it. Because he's a little different. He's not a person I wish ill for. Like I don't want him to be. Right. But there are certain, like, weirdly enough, I'll get like marketing from certain people, like emails or marketing, and I'm like, I don't want this person to do well. Like I'll think about that. I'll think that in my head. I'm like, what's that coming from, Joel? Like,
yeah, me too, actually.
Like, why don't I want this person to do well? Like, that's crazy. Like, it won't hurt me if they do well.
A little schadenfreude in there, right?
In fact, if they're in our industry and they do well, they could help, promote the things we're doing. So I'm like, where the heck is this coming from?
Yep.
But I watch as a mechanism, and I have to kind of really be, like, I don't know, like it almost creates a stinginess in me or like an unwillingness. Yeah. And I don't like it. It does not feel good when it comes up.
Well, because envy comes from a place of scarcity.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're already feeling like you don't have something somebody else has. And so it's already it's birthed in the energy of scarcity. Yeah. So of course it's going to create more scarcity. It's going to create it's a trajectory of scarcity. It's like, and I want them to be scarce too. I want all of us to be in this feeling of scarcity because that's the energy that I'm in right now when I'm feeling it. And so I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. So as we're talking about envy, what's coming up for you? As you're listening or watching along with us, have you experienced envy in your own life? Are you an Enneagram 4, like Antonia said, and this is like, you're like an expert with envy and what to do about it? Or is this something you have a really hard time identifying in your life? And also, if you do identify, do you have any growth strategies? So we want to hear from you. You haven't been on this walk with us in nature to be able to communicate. but we can have you come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode. You can leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your story. Maybe you've had people envious of you, at least in your life, where they've said, hey, or at least they've demonstrated to you, whether they've told you directly or not, you kind of sense, I think this person's envious of me. Or you've identified envy in your own self towards somebody else. Come over to personalityhacker.com and make your voice heard.
Yeah, at least you can identify it at all, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's hard to figure out inside of ourselves, it's a tricky one. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it in all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating review on Amazon or on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. And you might be watching us right now on YouTube because we did a video podcast and we're on YouTube. And if that's the case, you can like, subscribe, hit the little bell that lets you know when new episodes come out. And you can leave a comment for us as well in that section. And if you would like more growth strategies based on your personality type, if you want to go down the rabbit's hole of how to deal with things in your life, like take, for example, envy and other elements of your life that are just complicated and difficult to navigate through, we have a suite of programs that are designed, tailor-made for your personality type over at personalityhacker.com. Check out our suite of programs and our catalog and see which one is right for you.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.
Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality, and then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity, because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first, because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.